sometimes do. And I just need to gather myself, and for that, I need time. I want to make a video where I want to be in the video and share a little bit more about some coping mechanisms that I use for my anxiety, and hopefully somebody out there can use something to help them when it's unavoidable. You can't just escape it, it's coming. I wanted to share that with you, but by dealing with it, I need the time to do it, and that's what I did. Now that I feel better, now that I am whole, I can come back and be here for you. So, today's case is going to be one that it's referred to as the head in the bucket. It's a very interesting case, but it's gonna take us back to April 2001. At that time, Melanie O'Malley walked into the Vancouver, Canada Police Department. She told the police that she needed to talk about a murder. Her story was really hard to believe, and Melanie was also not taking us seriously because as a divorced woman living with her mother, having bipolar disorder, and recently hanging around local drug dealers, police just were not sure what to make out of her story. It is very easy for somebody that suffers from this disorder to have lapses, in perception, and that's how they are referred to. I am not informing you because of my knowledge, but this is part of the case and the experts' opinions and knowledge about this case. So, because of this lapses in perception, this could be not the actual truth, not because she wants to lie to the police, but because in her mind she believed this to be true. But Melanie gave a very detailed and, I would say, persuasive story. It all started 3 weeks ago, according to her, when her best friend Lee Ann Price went to visit Melanie, and she was crying inconsolably. She driving. What she saw in the bucket shocked her. It was a human head. Now, Melanie explained that Leanne showed up at her house again the following day, and this time she brought her boyfriend. His full name is Mihaly Ills, and people would call him Mike. She had previously met him and his associates, Derek Medinsky and Javin Dowling, at this bar that they all used to go to. Mihaly, or Mike, same thing, was well known throughout Vancouver as a drug dealer. As you can probably tell by his name, he was from another country. He was actually Hungarian, and he had been deported from Canada several times for drugs and weapons. He always managed to come back to Canada illegally. Now, this guy, Mihaly, he ran an operation that involved taking marijuana grown in British Columbia over the border into the United States. 1 pound of this would sell for $1,500 in Canada, but in the US, particularly in LA, they would get $6,000 for the same amount. The DEA estimated that at the time, the trafficking of Canadian marijuana into the US was a $1 billion industry. But rather than selling the weed for cash, they were exchanging it for crack cocaine, which they would then smuggle back into Canada. This would make them more money. Apparently, they were making more than $80,000 per deal. So knowing this, when Leanne showed up at her door with her boyfriend, the drug dealer, Melanie was terrified. And when Mihaly insisted that the three of them go for a ride, she was even more scared, knowing that he was a violent man. But she didn't say no because she was afraid he was going to hurt her. So Melanie rode with them to a garage. There they met one of Mihaly's associates, Derek Medinsky. was cleaning the inside of the van. Molly became agitated, and he pulled Melanie aside, kind of trying to intimidate her. He told her he wanted to show her what happens to people that betray him. So he opened the Home Depot bucket and showed her a human head. The craziest thing is that Melanie knew that person. It was 27-year-old Javan Dowling, another drug dealer in Molly's same team. Molly told Melanie that this guy, well, the head of this guy, apparently, he needed to give a little explanation of what happened. So he told Melanie that this guy was addicted to crack and that he had been skimming from their product, and that because of that, he blew a deal with one of their most important clients. So he, to prove himself to this client, decided to get rid of him. This guy, Javan Dowling, was also homosexual. And apparently he had a taste for extravagant things. And Molly didn't like that. This guy was living in a high-rise suite in downtown Vancouver's Wall Center. Now you have to remember that Melanie is telling this story to the detectives at the police station. At this point, she said that Molly wanted to store basically the head of this guy in her garage. Melanie didn't want to, but she was so scared that she felt like she didn't have a choice. So the guy moved the bucket with the head into her garage. Melanie wasn't sure why he wanted the head to be stored in her garage, but assumed that it was to make her believe that she was somewhat involved now in this murder. The next day, Leanne and her boyfriend showed up again at Melanie's house, and they took the bucket with the head from the garage and left. several drug-related arrests. And recently he had been reported missing by his family members. So now the story is starting to make a little bit of sense. So they started tracking Mihaly Isles. It wasn't hard because he was already in police custody, waiting to be deported back to Hungary. Before they went to talk to him, they wanted to speak to Derek Medinsky. When police approached him for questioning him, he didn't want to talk to them. He said that he was friends with Mihaly, but said he knew nothing about a head in the bucket. So they needed to find something in Melanie's testimony that would, have some kind of something they could corroborate. And Melanie told police that she had seen Medinsky cleaning the inside of the van, and vehicle records show that Medinsky had recently sold the van. So the police looked for it, and they found it in this used car sales lot. They took it in for forensic analysis. They took pictures. They looked for fingerprints, blood. They just needed to prove that there wasn't true to Melanie's story. They found blood, but they needed to confirm that it was Jaman's blood. Something you should know that all three of these drug dealers were also bodybuilders. When they searched Japan's home, they found a weight-lifting glove. Inside the glove, they were able to analyze skin cells that matched the DNA from the blood found in the van. There was no question in the detective's mind that Melanie's story was credible. They had proof that he bled in the van, but they didn't have proof that he was dead. They knew that Derek Medinsky was involved in the crime, so they got a warrant for his cell phone. And after listening to his phone calls, they realized that he was still helping his friend Mihaly run the drug operation from prison. In addition to the wiretap, undercover police tried to infiltrate the drug ring started to tell Leanne how messed up she was after seeing the head in the bucket, that she felt guilty and that she was considering going to the police. Leanne didn't admit to anything, but she tried to help her friend calm down, and she told her that she needed to call her back. Leanne hung up the phone with Melanie and called her boyfriend, Mihaly Isles, at the prison. When Leanne called the prison, police thought that she would talk to him about the murder, but detectives were shocked with this conversation. She told her boyfriend that the two of them needed to get married. Molly was confused by her saying this, but she assured him that she would explain to him later. Police at that point realized that Leanne knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that if they were married, she couldn't be compelled to testify against her husband because she hasn't done it yet. So 2 days later, they got married in the prison, or at the prison chapel. He was going to be deported soon, so the police needed to hurry up and find the evidence that a murder happened before he was deported. Melanie was also very worried about his release. She knew that he still ran his business from prison and that he could easily send somebody to kill her. She also knew that he had been deported earlier, actually several times, but that didn't stop him from coming back. So 10 days before he was deported, the police charged him with first-degree murder, despite not having a body. The charge gave them some leverage to put on Derek Medinsky. So they gave him a choice. He needed to participate in the prosecution of his friend, or he would be charged as an accomplice in the murder of Javon Dowling. Medinsky was no idiot. He was a career criminal. And he was not bothered with 10 hours of questioning. Detectives then offered him complete immunity if he testified against his associate. So he accepted the offer and agreed to tell the whole story of what happened to Javon Dowling. Medinsky confessed that he and Molly, and Dowling too, Javon Dowling, they were planning on going to a movie together. Molly was in the back seat of the van. Medinsky drove, and Javon was in the passenger seat. They were driving through West Vancouver when Molly asked, Dowling, or Javal, I keep calling him by his last name, but Javal, Dowling, to reach over on the dashboard and turn off the interior light of the van. When Javal did that, as he leaned over the middle of the van, Mahali pulled out his revolver and shot him 4 times in the back of the head. Then he mumbled, quote, "There's not enough room for bags in this world." He then lowered the passenger seat all the way back so the body couldn't be seen from the street, and they drove back to their garage and parked the van inside. Once inside the garage, they removed the body and they started cleaning the van. Then Mahali took the body into another room and cut his head off. Mahali told his associate Medinsky that because of this guy's drug addiction, he sorted a particularly important client, and that the client threatened him, telling him that he needed to seek retribution if, he didn't take care of the guy. He would, basically. So he was scared for his life, and that's why he did it. He also said that he cut the head so that he could show the client that he had taken care of the problem guy. The goats are being super loud. I'm sorry. But it's 9 p.m. and they're still out, so they're kind of being loud for going to bed. They just want to be put to bed with some grain, of course. So you'll hear them in the background. Hopefully it's not super loud. My husband is doing chores for me so I can do this video. Anyway, Medinsky told police that he didn't see the body or the head until a week later when Mahali asked for help in disposing of the body. They were gonna bury it in the woods and cover it with lime because Mahali believed that lime helps a body decompose more rapidly, and so they drove 40 miles north to a remote wooded area near Squamish, BC, to bury the body. The judge in Vancouver had told detectives that they had 1 day to present evidence that he was actually the murderer. If they couldn't come up with a body, they would have to deport him back to Hungary. So at this point, the police had Medinsky take them to that place where the body was buried. And they did find the head of Javan Dowling. It was well preserved. And, it wasn't lime what he needed to use. It was lye. Lye would really, speed up the decomposition. But lime, which is completely different, acts is a preservative, so not the right product. The one he chose to get this thing done. So Medinsky had told the police that he was shot 4 times, remember? And this was in the back of the head. Medinsky also testified against Mahali, but when time came, Mahali also testified and claimed that Medinsky was the one that killed Javan Dowling. In March of 2003, a British Columbia Supreme Court jury found Mihaly Isles guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the opportunity of parole for 25 years. 7 years later, so in 2010, the defense claimed that the judge had made a mistake when instructing the jury, and that his rights, Mahaly's rights, had been violated. The defense also argued that certain evidence was not disclosed by the prosecution, so his verdict ended up being overturned, and he got a second trial. During the second trial, the defense argued that letters that were written to Leanne and other friends of Mihaly were not presented as evidence, and that those letters would really prove his innocence. The letters were just full of conspiracy theories in which he blamed both Derek Medinsky and Melanie O'Malley for the murders. He also said in those letters that Melanie's description of events was motivated by jealousy because she felt that Leanne was spending all of her time with him and she was jealous of her friend. In one of those letters also there was something that spoke of suspicion that Javan Dowling was still alive and in hiding. Another letter claimed that he believed the blood found in the van was from when Javan and his boyfriend got in a fist fight and he got a bloody nose. In another letter claiming that there was no murder at all, they said that, where it said that police were fabricating evidence and playing KGB mind tricks. Using yet another letter, the prosecution was able to prove that the prior letters were all written as a ruse, with the intention of the police intercepting them. The letter that the prosecution presented read, quote, "There is our defense. The white letter says it all. Who killed whom, why? It will be like an ace in our pocket. This could decide the case, make it or break it." End quote. After the second trial, Just 3 months after Javon Dowling's death, Derek Madinsky was involved in another drug-related murder in California. Madinsky was with his other associate, Gary Favell, who traveled to LA for another of their marijuana for cocaine deals. This time they brought a new guy, Joe Bralick, with them. And he was not a career criminal like them, but was headed in that direction. So when he heard he could make some quick cash by handling the transaction, and they arranged for him to meet with the LA buyers. The three men traveled to LA together, but only Madinsky and Favell came back to Canada. On July 5th, 2002, Joe Bralick's body was discovered in the middle of the day behind a discount tire store in Fullerton, California. He had been shot and his body was wrapped in plastic, lying between two parked cars. His killer has never been found, although we suspect who could have done it. I read a lot about this case. Some people are calling it not interested, or saying that they were not interested, or that the case was not interesting because it involved drug dealers and how they should all die, basically. Yes, maybe the victim is not your typical innocent person who just was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it is interesting to see how we as your typical people, normal, to call it something, have these different labels for different people, and how some people were not happy with Melanie going to the authorities to tell them about the head in the bucket. Now, to me, a murder is a murder, no matter who you are, no matter if you're a piece of garbage or if you're a child. A murder is a murder, and everyone should have to pay for what they do. So such a kind of weird case to cover because of the public opinion about, in our judgment, I guess, about who should be allowed to live and who shouldn't. Now, if I had a choice, nobody would be a drug dealer. And although they kind of sign up for that life, and although they know that chances are they will die in a horrible way, I still think that a murder is a murder, and that we are responsible for finding whoever is responsible. So I can't not say that this was a tragic case, because it was. It made this case, are you on the side of, criminals should die, or I don't care if they're murdered, or are you on the other side of, a murder is a murder and we need to find who's the responsible one for that? I would love to know what you think. Apparently my husband put them inside already because they finally quiet down by the time I'm done with the video. So not helpful. Oh, they're still outside. He's probably feeding them. This house is a concert, and I thought that this was gonna be the perfect time, but as you can see, there's always something going on. I hope that this case was interesting to you, and that you share your thoughts with me in the comments down below. I'd really like to know your position in this kind of cases, and the justice in your head, what makes sense for this kind